Hello everyone, my name is Dana Allen. I work for the town of Waterbury as a contractor doing flood resilience grants management. I'm also on the planning commission, but I just want to make clear that tonight I'm speaking as a grant consultant for this project. And this project that we're going to be talking about tonight is the Randall Meadow Flood Resilience Project. This is a critical project for flood resilience and flood elevation reduction in the town of Waterbury that's been years in the making. And we're doing this presentation just to provide some background for the upcoming bond vote on town meeting day. So, why are we talking about this? Well, since 2011 and Tropical Storm Irene, we've had a lot of flood events. July 23, December 23, and July 24. It's impacted the same homes and businesses over and over. We've seen damages in downtown, Randall and Elm Street neighborhoods, South Main Street, Route 2, all over town, really. We've got damage estimates ranging from $2.8 to $12.9 million in damages to residences and businesses. We've also sustained a lot of municipal infrastructure damage. We thought Irene was a once in a generation event, but since then, obviously, we've seen more flooding. And just to underscore this, this is kind of what we're looking at as far as floods in a sort of a historical timeline. What was once in a century is now happening multiple times per decade. You see that 2011 flood with Irene, and then we had three more in rapid succession. So these are really increasing in frequency. It used to be a major flood maybe every 20 years. Now we're looking at that increasing in frequency. And so that's just increasing our damage. And we've got an opportunity to do some proactive planning and some mitigation for these events. This requires us to invest in this project proactively. We've got an opportunity to leverage community development block grant disaster recovery funding. We've been awarded $2 million. It's available now and it's really one-time funding. So what is the solution that we're talking about? Well, it's the Randall Meadow project. It's basically a 48-acre site between the Winooski River and Randall Street. We're talking about lowering the elevation of the entire field, so removing about 100,000 cubic yards of material. The state has agreed to transfer this property to us so that we can restore about 40 acres of functional floodplain. So this is going to increase our natural flood storage capacity. It's going to absorb floodwaters, basically like a big giant bathtub. We'll get to suck up that floodwater temporarily and then release it slowly as the flood abates. We're also trying to maintain an existing recreational trail there to provide this long-term sustainable flood mitigation solution. And you can see from here, this is basically what we're looking at. So, the average across the entirety of the site is about a foot of elevation reduction. And then we've got a deeper area. I think we've seen all those photos of that high point in the field. That's about a 3.5 foot elevation reduction average. Some might be a little bit more, some might be a little less. But we're really talking about a lot of material over a huge area. So what is this project actually going to do? We're talking about reducing flood levels by 0.3 to 1 foot across about 7,000 feet of main stem Winooski River. So that green line there, that shows what about 7,000 feet from the project site upstream is. So really all through the downtown area, even past the Route 2 bridge. So we get a lot of benefit across a wide area. This benefits a lot of different zones in town. This could prevent first floor flooding in some extreme events, and it also reduces infrastructure damage and repair costs. And remember, every time this happens, those costs compound. It's not like it's a one-time $300,000 infrastructure damage. It's like unknown amounts of damage that happens each time. So, we're going to get a chance to protect 200 homes and 20 businesses, roughly, based on past damages estimates there. This is what I really like about this project here. We've got a really strong cost to benefit ratio. So essentially through our analyses, for every dollar invested, we get about $4.20 in benefits. That was done for the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. We had the strongest benefit cost analysis in that program for those resilience projects. So we've got a really strong project here. It's actually shocking that in that program we weren't chosen for funding. We are still an alternate in that program, and we're still holding out hope that some funding will come as a result of that. So that's part of our return on investment. But another thing that we're looking at is ecosystem services value. We're going to talk about this a little bit later, but we're looking at over $15 million in ecosystem services. So things like carbon and phosphorus sequestration, habitat restoration, and river function will be returned. We also get a lot of benefit in avoided flood damages. And avoided flood damages are essentially avoidance of damage to buildings. And so we've got anywhere from around $50,000 to more per structure across about 100 buildings. So that actually totals up to about $3 million. We'll see this in a later slide, but just to preface that, that's a huge amount of reduction. Again, that's an estimate. We don't know exactly what that is. It's hard to get your arms around this precisely, but that's a really good metric. and it just prevents this repeated repair and recovery expenses. And it protects our tax base and our property values. We're looking at fewer buyouts potentially if we can protect these homes. And just as some background here, we did actually do a quick estimate with some numbers provided to us by crew for the July 23 flooding. This was submitted as part of this grant, but we saw estimates as low as 2.8 million and as high as 12.9 million across a variety of neighborhoods and structures for damages sustained during that time. So we really do have the potential for relatively high avoided damages if we get these benefits that we're projecting. So again, I want to talk about that ecosystem restoration services number of 15 million. This is important background. I mentioned carbon and phosphorus sequestration as well as other functions. It's that phosphorus sequestration that's actually really important for us here because that rolls us, or that basically sets us up for enrollment in the Clean Water Fund phosphorus reduction grant funding stream to essentially reduce phosphorus going into Lake Champlain as part of that total maximum daily load, the effort to reduce harmful algal blooms in Lake Champlain. Doing this project could potentially sequester a lot of phosphorus through sequestration of sediment, through vegetation growth, through soil binding of those phosphorus particles. That's not an insignificant amount of money. We stand to get anywhere close to $1 million potentially from that fund and others in the state. That's state money, that's ongoing. This bond vote and this grant that we've already gotten really set us up to say, listen, we can make this project a reality. We present that to these funders, this Clean Water Fund, and we say, listen, we've already lined up these ducks. Let's do this. We've got the guarantees. So that's why this bond vote is critical. That's also something I want to signal is that we're bonding for the full amount. We've already obtained $2 million. We have the chance to obtain more funding. So the likelihood of us as a town being on the hook for that full bond amount is actually likely very low. As I said, we've already gotten $2 million, so 45% of that. And again, we talked about these avoided building damages, but even if we look at that as a relatively conservative $3 million, if we spend this, 4.3 million, call it total for this one project, we avoid some amount of those building damages. And this project lifespan is projected to be 30 to 50 years. So that compounds over time. So say we have 5 more floods in that 50-year time period, that's potentially $15 to $20 million of avoided damages. So it's a one-time investment of $4.3 million, all in total cost. That's really good return. So project timeline, I know people have asked about this. This is very fluid right now, but we've gone through the application phase where we got the grants. That was very important. Now we're on to the award and setup phase. So we're trying to finalize this grant agreement, doing some background for that. Then we get into planning and procurement. So hopefully by February of 2027, we've got this environmental review process done. We've got our permitting lined up, and we can start issuing bids, procure that in spring of 27. Then we move to construction phase, ideally in early summer of 27, full construction season there. And then project completion looking like 2028, so essentially a 3-year timeline. That's ideally, we've got 5 to 6 years, depending on how you cut it with this grant. But if we do it in 3, then we get those project benefits even sooner. And this is a realistic timeline, with property transfer, permitting, etc. So the budget for this, as I mentioned, about $4.3 million all in. There's some administrative tasks here. A big portion of that is design at $100K and permitting at about $30K. Plus some archaeological and environmental review services. This is a site that's had a lot of use over time. It's got some contamination that we have to deal with in the soils, so we have to mitigate that. And then some compliance work that we have to do, but that totals about $500,000 over the course of this grant's life. Then we look at our construction phase tasks, and that's about $3.8 million total. We do have contingencies in here, 5% for each of these buckets. But the site work, the excavation, is about $3 million. And essentially that's moving 100,000 cubic yards of soil. One important note on that, as this project moves forward, we're going to need to find places for that soil. So honestly, we're looking for places close to Waterbury, old gravel pits, quarries, large areas that can't be, streams, wetlands, things like that. But we're looking actively for places where we could potentially truck this material. So obviously pending soil examination. But this is a big part of it. So again, 3.8 million for construction phase, so we're about 4.3 all in. So why do we want to support this bond? We can basically guarantee the full project with complete benefits occurs. Now, we've got $2 million in hand. We could phase this project, right? Or we could do part of it. If we do part of it, we don't realize economies of motion. We don't realize economies of scale and scope. We also get reduced benefits. So say we did maybe 45% of that topographic reduction. I don't even know if we get 45% of the benefits. It's not exactly how hydrology and hydraulics work. But we definitely don't get the full benefit across that full 7,000 feet. We might not get as much flood reduction or flood elevation reduction as we're projecting. So really, I kind of look at it as like replacing the roof on your house, right? Like you don't rip off the old roof and then replace half and put a tarp up for the other half and just hope that rain won't come. You kind of do the whole project. You bite the bullet. You just make it happen. We've already made, half of this project essentially get funded. We just have to guarantee that we can find money for the rest of it. And that's the next important thing I want to talk about here. It's been my job over the past year and a half to raise awareness of this project and others in Waterbury, get a handle on the funding landscape and make sure that funders know what we're doing and line up for these projects. And so, like I mentioned, we have this clean water fund within the state of Vermont, phosphorus reduction fund primarily to clean up Lake Champlain, reduce those harmful algal blooms. There's also these enhancement grants that go hand in glove with these clean water fund grants. The important part there is phosphorus reduction. Our project has potentially very high phosphorus reduction, so it really sets us up as one of the largest, if not the largest, floodplain reconnection project in the state with the highest phosphorus reduction number, potentially. We still have to do a lot of modeling for this, but we're on their radar. They know what we're doing. We've gotten, a lot of feedback from them, and I think that we're really lined up to get a good amount of additional funding, maybe up to $1 million out of those two pots of money. There's also that hazard mitigation grant program. That's a FEMA program. We are on their radar. We're an alternate. They know we're looking for money. We're in contact with Vermont Emergency Management, who's administering that fund on a monthly basis, if not more. They're probably super annoyed with me at this point, frankly. But we're on their radar. Same with the Lake Champlain Basin program. Smaller grants for implementation, but we've got an opportunity there. We're on the radar of the WHISPER program, which is a grant program that goes hand in glove with the Clean Water State Revolving Fund loan program. So you can get natural resources projects funded if you do things like get a loan for a wastewater treatment plant upgrade. We've been in touch with a number of communities that are doing SRF loans. We've been in touch with the program administrator for WHISPER. So we're on a lot of people's radars for money. They know what we're doing. And so closing that $2.3 million gap, maybe not completely, but in some substantial way, seems very doable to me. And I'm fairly pessimistic about this stuff. So I think we've set ourselves up well. If we phase this project, or if we don't fully bond for this project and we kind of end up like stalling a bit, it sets us back years. The CDBG DR funding is really the catalyst that we needed. So, hopefully we can guarantee that this full project will happen with this bond vote. I continue doing my job, get more money, close that gap, reduce the amount that we ultimately pay as a town, and then we actually get this project in the ground. So the other thing I want to note is that the CDBG DR funding is one time, so this is our only shot at this pot of money, realistically. So we've leveraged it to the maximum that we can. This bond vote then allows us to fully leverage the entire scope, get the full benefits of this project as currently scoped, and go from there. I know that was relatively quick. Also, I'll recognize that I'm not in the room. I'm in a totally different time zone, like quite a different time zone. So showing up tonight in person, even via Zoom, wasn't feasible. So I do apologize for that, but I wanted to make the best effort here. So questions can be directed to my email, dana@fluidstateconsulting.com. I'm happy to answer email questions as best I can, or direct you to the right resource if I can't answer. So anyway, I hope this was helpful in understanding what this bond vote is about, what this project is about. And again, please do feel free to reach out. So thank you.